Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have the folks from LucidLink here. We've started to use it. A bunch of folks in our group have started to use it. So we're going to introduce many of you to LucidLink and see what you think. So if you have questions about LucidLink, go ahead and check it out while we're doing our first hour and get those questions rolling for the second hour. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitchell, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. Our first one comes from David Barton in Memphis, Tennessee. What are some common optimizations when designing an ATEM Mini rig? I'm looking at using MixEffect, Stream Deck, and Companion, etc.
Go ahead, Karl.
So I would suggest good quality HDMI cables. This is going to be a thing that'll always fail you. So Roland make HDMI cables. Roland don't make anything but mixers. So just like Blackmagic. So the Roland cables, as you can see here, they're actually very competitively priced and they're very thick. So these aren't very lightweight cables, but they run up to 25 feet, which is generally where HDMI kind of rolls off before you go to an active cable. But yeah, I would suggest investing in Roland cables. They don't make the Apple cables, but the Apple cables are too short anyway for HDMI purposes, generally for an ATEM. But yeah, invest in Roland cables, my suggestion would be.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, once you find a set of cables you like, stay with them so that they're all the same. It sort of eliminates some quality issues. And I didn't know that about Roland, so that's kind of cool. I like the idea of the MixEffect and MixEffect Pro with the Stream Deck and the Companion because at my fingertips on the 32 button, I can hit and do anything on the ATEM. So it's a wonderful addition because you can do everything right there.
And when you think about rig, just think about whether that has to travel or not. So do you need to build something into it? I think Aaron Parecki and I think that Guy may have some. Guy, do you have some rigs that you're selling?
We do have Aaron Parecki's. They're basically 3D printed stands, and so they help with the airflow and they help with strain relief of the cables. And you can put a Stream Deck right next with the additional accessory, which is kind of nice. So they line up perfectly, and it's nice to be able to just reach down, especially if you're not looking at it and know where things are at. So I like Aaron Parecki's stuff.
And did he build a travel rig for that? Someone has built a travel rig for the Extreme?
I can put a link to Stream Bay. They have some rigs that they've built based out of a plastic, like it's not a Pelican case, but a knockoff style ABS hard case. And the thing with those that I like is that they have the basically it's a loop out so that your ports aren't getting the stress on them, because that's over time if you're traveling, plugging in and plugging in. It's nice to have some kind of way of distributing that HDMI off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say that MixEffect Pro, I think is the most effective when you have an Extreme, because you're going to have that super source. The thing that I use, MixEffect Pros can do a lot of things, but the thing I use the most is being able to manage the super sources. It literally transforms any ATEM that has super sources into an entirely different machine. But I think that if you have the smaller ATEM, I'm not sure if you'll. And I have to admit that with the smaller ones, I haven't used Stream Deck or Companion because I haven't needed it, because there's so little to do other than cut, which is great. But it's a much simpler system. Go ahead, Tom.
I sought out a special cover. This is made by Deck Saver because I had a unique problem here at the house, and that is I kept fading to black when I wasn't expecting to.
Fading to black, cat. There we go. That's funny. Go ahead, Felipe.
Well, one other thing to think about MixEffect is that it runs on Apple Silicon computers, so you don't need to run always on an iPad. You can have it on a Mac.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, next question.
Next question in from Eduardo Augustine in Panama. Which mixer would you recommend for a small rig flykit to stream live weddings, funerals, sports, minimum 4 XLR inputs to ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Karl.
So this is going to be the one that replaces pretty much a MixPre 6. So it's a Tascam X8. So it's half the price as MixPre 6. It has the 4 inputs. Pretty much it's feature matched identically to the MixPre 6. It has the same outputs as MixPre 6 as well, which is, 1/8 inch out, which will go directly into the ATEM, as you're saying in your question. But this is half the price. The preamps in this are as good, if not a little bit better, than MixPre 6. That's because Tascam's been making preamps for 50 years. But yeah, this would be my suggestion. It runs off much easier to find batteries as well. The batteries will last a lot longer than this. This is not going to be as power hungry as MixPre 6. But if you want to stick with an American brand, then MixPre 6. If you're okay going with a Japanese brand, Tascam.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
We've been talking it up. The Rodecaster Pro 2 just announced the preamps are better than they have been in the past, and probably not as good as a Sound Devices MixPre or the Zoom just shown there. But it's a nice little piece of kit, and it looks neat.
Yeah, I think that as a fly kit, I think the thing to think about is just where you're going to put it, how much space is it going to have, what kind of, whether you want an open interface or not. I will admit that I would go to a MixPre 10 to do the mix, mostly because it has balanced outputs there, or look at some of the Zoom options. So Zoom has a lot of great options in that kind of range. It didn't give us a range, and so, but I will say that I would be surprised. I might differ with Karl a little bit, only because I've had a lot of Tascam stuff, and one of my chief complaints about Tascam has been the preamps. So I haven't used new ones, so they could have improved a lot. So, but that hasn't been the best part of their hardware in the past. Next question.
It's when I get to read my own question. Would it be advisable to dual NIC my M1 Mac to connect to a regular switch and another power over Ethernet switch for Dante?
Go ahead, Felipe.
Well, I would say you definitely want to have them in different VLANs, your Dante network from your normal network. Dante can literally crash a whole network if there's too many things going on there.
Yeah, and go ahead, Jason.
It's not necessarily required, but I would say absolutely every single time and twice on Sunday.
Okay, next question.
Next question in from David Barton in Memphis, Tennessee. What's your favorite hidden feature in the ATEM Mini line? Any Easter eggs as you move up to the more powerful models?
Go ahead, Karl.
So this feature goes from the ATEM Vanilla right up to the Constellation 8K. So this is a MIDI control for the Fairlight mixer inside. So I personally don't like software mixers. I don't like using a mouse to do my mixing. So having a MIDI control surface, pretty much from any brand, including Blackmagic Zone, of course, the Fairlight version, to control that mixer, you can have the graphical display there to see what you're doing. But as far as actually having tactile, motorized faders, you can actually do that through this.
Go ahead, Sky.
I had forgotten that I had the original ATEM Mini at the place I participate on Sunday morning, and I had gone back and helped them this last week, and I'd forgotten how much I needed the multi-camera function, and I didn't have it in the original one. And so it was like, that's not an Easter egg, but boy, if I had an extra $100, I'd buy a new one for them.
Go ahead, Chris.
I know that on the highest end ATEMs, you get scalers on all the inputs. I don't know how far down the chain that comes. I mean, obviously in the minis, no, because everything's limited to 1080. But do we know if the clearly they don't. I was going to say do the Constellation HDs, but I just realized no, they do not. They probably are limited to 1080.
Yeah, they're limited to 1080. They do have scalers and frame syncs in all of those. So if you're giving it a 720 60 signal and another input's got 720 30, it will sync them both together. So as far as frame rate goes, it works, but not necessarily resolution. I think that for me the fun little thing that I find useful is in the Constellation and also in the ATEM Minis, or the whole line, or not, well, at least the extremes, you can change the orientation of your multi-views. And so you can double tap on them. So when you open up the multi-view control, if you tap on them, you can make the top two full, like it can be 4 singles, or it can be 2 singles and 2 quads below it, or it can be all quads. So you can basically build a 16 up if you wanted to. I needed to do this for something recently. So the multi-view coming out of the switcher can be a 16 up instead of a 4 up, or a partial up and down. Yeah, so you can change how that multi-view looks. You're not stuck with what it came with. And the other thing that, of course, is the secret sauce there is the API. Now, the fact that you can get to almost anything that you need to do on these switchers from code is one of the chief reasons that we use Blackmagic, is because of all their hardware is addressable. and we can actually build things to control it. This whole show is run because of that. So that you're watching is because of that addressability. Next question.
Ken Jones from Seattle, Washington. I recently added the program Parallels to my Intel MacBook Pro. Any pitfalls to avoid? Things to do or not to do?
Felipe?
Well, watch the amount of RAM that you have, first of all, because you're going to be sharing that with your OS. But always set your virtual machines to create snapshots. That's a smart guard feature inside Parallels. And that can save your bacon at some point if you're using those for any mission critical things.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, Felipe's answer is excellent. I would add to that, do use an eGPU if you have one or have good access to one. It will definitely help. And don't get too dependent upon it, because Parallels, the next time you get a new Mac, is not going to run Windows. It'll run other stuff, but not really well Windows.
Sky.
Also, the challenge of which Windows version are you going to be able to run on that old of a machine? So you're not going to be able to run. Potentially, you're not going to be able to run the most recent version of Windows operating system. So that would be, again, for the age, be OS dependent.
Go, Tom.
Also, when you're setting up your virtual machines, make sure you go into settings on this screen for each machine and set up your CPU memory, how the keyboard and mouse are interacting. I set up auto detect for games, even though I'm not a gamer. It tends to give you a better response time on the machine.
Next question.
And I get to ask another one. What is the preferred beverage for office hours panelist while on the air?
Go ahead, Jason.
A Red Bull, espresso, or Perrier. Depends on my mood.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I've been drinking a lot of orange juice in the morning, but I'm trying to manage my sugar now. So yesterday, a guy came on with that green slime that he drinks, and I found that I had some of that green slime right here.
Is it called Soylent Green?
It could be. It's people.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm raising my hand for the traditionalists, a large thermal cup of black coffee that manages to remain warm through the entire 3 hours of this.
Go ahead, Sky.
Early days of office hours, coffee was not my friend. It was like throwing gasoline on me, and that didn't turn out well. So I've moved over to yoga tea, and I always get the little tab that says, today, may this day be a day to lead us to peace, to happiness and joy. So I get good tea, hot drink, and a nice saying. And
a good message. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I alternate between coffee and Diet Dr. Pepper.
Nice. I start off in coffee about 4:30 in the morning when I get up, between 4 and 4:30, and it's a big cup of coffee, and that kind of turns things on. But during the show, I pretty much exclusively drink PG Tips, or if on a good day, if someone has smuggled some in from Africa, Taganda tea, which is the better version of PG Tips. And then on Sundays, I put a little honey and milk in it. So, but otherwise, it's all black, just because I'm trying to cut my calories, and so the milk and the honey doesn't help. So anyway, and I have two of those usually that I work. I have the first hour cup and the second hour cup in my little embers, and so they stay warm, and I'm able to kind of make it through the whole thing. Next question.
Next question in from TJ. Excuse me. From TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I want to use Final Cut to edit together the videos I took using my iPhone during my vacation to preserve the Dolby Vision dynamic range. When I go to choose a color space for the project, only standard range Rec 709 is available to me. Any ideas why?
Felipe?
Yes. Select your library, go into the inspector. On the top right, there is a modify. You click on that modify, and then you change from standard to wide gamut HDR. And then your library will be enabled for HDR. So then you can put your videos on a Rex 2020 PQ timeline, for example.
I think that Apple just did that to protect us from ourselves. That's the only reason I can think of why they did that, because it's super frustrating. Like, it was super frustrating when I first started trying to figure out why can't I make an event the right thing? Yeah, go ahead, Felipe.
And one more thing, DaVinci Resolve does not read that metadata. So it will show the colors really badly.
I think that the transfer function in Resolve is for HLG, because it's an HLG based record with Dolby Vision metadata on top, and so if you don't, so you have to interpret it as HLG, not as Dolby Vision, and I think that you'll get something that looks more normal. It just doesn't have all the metadata that Dolby has. You can actually get it back to Dolby Vision in Resolve by interpreting it as HLG and then shifting it to Dolby Vision. You can reanalyze
I'll get some
it.
colorists to take a look at that today.
Yeah, have someone look at that, but you should be able to. You should be able to because it records HLG and then saves the metadata. Without the metadata, it just reads it as HL. It's just an HLG curve, which was the easiest one to manage. Otherwise you'd always have to be dealing with metadata. So HLG is the only HDR curve that doesn't require metadata, and so it took me a little while to figure out why Apple did that. But if you you should be able to import it. You interpret it as HLG and then reanalyze it to bring it up to Dolby Vision using the DV tools inside of Resolve. Go ahead, Karl.
So this is something I had to find out myself. Yeah. So essentially, if you just drag in or bring in assets that are Dolby Vision from the phone, then you can just edit. You don't have to change a project or anything. Just edit as you would with all your footage from your phone that is in HLG Dolby Vision. When you go to export, that's where it's going to trip you up. You need to make sure that you select the format as Apple devices, because it's HLG Dolby Vision, which is an Apple device specific format. So the top one, the trip is people go, oh, I want this to go out to everyone. Change to Apple devices, then your video codec can be 10-bit HLG Dolby Vision, and then you'll notice it automatically will go to 2020 HLG down the bottom there. That's why it's Apple devices, because this flavor is very Apple centric. This is not a flavor you'll see widely used on media elsewhere. But yeah, so the Apple devices, if you don't put your format to Apple devices when you go to export your project, you won't see the options to get HLG Dolby Vision. So I found that one out myself as well.
And I believe that you need to. I'm not 100% certain of this, but I do believe that if you manually pull these off of your phone, you need to make sure you grab the metadata. If you bring them into iPhoto or Photos, and then bring them into Final Cut through Photos, I believe that it'll carry the metadata with it, as opposed to dropping it out on the way through. Go ahead, Bill.
I confirm that. And in fact, I bring my things through Photos exactly for that reason. I will also say, test your workflow ahead of time. And the reason I say that is I'm in the middle of a project right now that was shot about 50% on the Blackmagic 6K and half on an iPhone with every setting turned up to maximum. I've been shocked and surprised at how long it takes some of that HDR 4K footage off the phone to process in Final Cut to get it ready for a timeline, particularly the whole process of importing it, making proxies, and preparing to work. So if you're doing something long, and I was shooting 45-minute to an hour seminars, just test your workflow and make sure you're not going to bog yourself down with 3 or 4 days of transcoding before you get into your timeline to start working. It all works, but those big files take a lot of time to process.
Go ahead, Karl.
So yeah, quickly, the way to get your files into Final Cut, yeah, you're right. You have to use Photos. The way you do it is, if you don't have iCloud Sync turned on, you just manually plug in your phone to your Photos account, Photos, and then let it sync up. Then you have to select the videos you want to export, highlight them, then go to export, then export unmodified. So that's how you do it. So if you unmodify, it simply sends out bit for bit what it is, and you have to do it that way. So there is a lot of gotchas in this to keep the HLG preserved and the metadata preserved. So you have to go to Photos is the receptacle you have to use. You can't use image capture. It won't work because it will strip it down to 8-bit. So you got to use unmodified from Photos, because Photos supports Dolby Vision HLG. So all the Photos variants support it.
And specifically, it won't strip it to 8-bit, but it'll strip the metadata away, because it's right. A 10-bit color.
Yeah. So
so it'll still stay 10-bit color, but it will strip the metadata from it. Go ahead, Chris.
TJ, I do this all the time, and what I like to do is I will start an iMovie project on my phone, and I will just sit there, and because it's something I can do casually, I don't have to like sit down to work, whatever. And I just start adding videos into an iMovie project. I don't bother trying to put them in any order. You could roughly edit it in iMovie if you wanted to. And then I sit down at my computer. I don't plug any cables in. I just go boop, boop, boop. I want to export the project. Under options in iMovie, you can export either a video or the project. I export that straight to the Mac, and then from there, you will open that in iMovie on your Mac, and you can then push it in that whole thing into Final Cut. I just use AirDrop. It works great. I do it all the time.
Interesting. It's an interesting workflow, and it pulls in, if it's HDR, it pulls all that with it. It's automatically set up.
You get all of it, and here's what I like about it, TJ. If you're gonna knuckle down and make a big job out of editing your vacation videos, you're gonna do it less. And so what I like to do it in a casual way. Our grandkids are moving to Colorado, and we're really sad about that. And a couple of weeks ago, I sat there, and my wife had gone to bed, and we have a 400 square foot apartment here, so when she goes to bed, there's not a lot I can do without annoying her. And so I just sat there on my phone, and I just scrolled back through 7 years of videos of our grandson and just dumped it into the iMovie thing. I then, and now think about it, I'm kind of just scrolling backwards, right? I guess I could have started when he was born, whatever. So then I did the iMovie thing. I pushed it through to Final Cut. I took all the clips out of the timeline, sorted the bin by creation date, select all, hit the letter E. Now all the clips are in chronological order. Pick some nice music, boop, 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 do the edit thing. But yeah, I do that all the time. It's super easy.
That's great. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a question for us. The latest release of Autodesk Flame can run on an Apple Silicon Mac. Wouldn't there still be a risk of overheating running processor-heavy rendering, for example, on a small MacBook Pro? I know my 15-inch Intel can get very warm sometimes.
Go ahead, Jason.
No. In fact, if it were to happen, you'd be the first one.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, and I look back on what it took to run Flame or Smoke. It took a whole rack of silicon graphics processors and RAIDs and all kinds of stuff. So it's hard to get your head around the fact that you can put it into a MacBook or on a small M1 Mac Mini. So the paradigm has changed quite a bit. So heat management, that's the least of your worries. Space management should be what you're considering.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, Flame is a high-end compositing system that used to cost $250,000 at least, and it was on very heavy equipment, as he said, the silicon equipment, but that you can now run it on a laptop is pretty amazing, and that actually speaks to the power of what the MacBook is now doing. Also, that you would always have a MacBook sitting next to your Hewlett-Packard Flame machine, because the early days of Flame, their font manipulation was not the best, and many of my friends that ran Flames did all of their work in After Effects and then brought it and composited it in the Flame system. So there's lots of ways to make that happen, but that's kind of amazing that they've come this far.
I think the biggest risk of putting Flame on your Mac Studio is that I would say I would put it on a Mac Studio. I probably wouldn't put it on a laptop, and I'd really dedicate some time, because Flame's really expensive and really complicated. So this is something that you do nearly full time. Like as a Flame operator, you're going to go through training. You're going to figure things out. It's not for the faint of heart, for learning it. The interface has been around for a long time. Flame operators get paid a lot of money, but they get paid a lot of money because it's a big investment to get good at it. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Does it still have the same cachet that it used to have back in the 90s?
No, it's not as, it doesn't, so many people are using other things that are less expensive now. But I think Flame operators still command and we have a couple Flame operators in office hours, so maybe we'll bring them on and have them show what makes Flame. So I think that we have a few people that are there. If you're listening, ping me and we'll set up a second hour for you just to show off Flame. I'd rather show it off from inside the group than bring somebody in from outside. But it is I think that the Flame operators still are expensive, because the Flame systems, it can run on Apple Silicon Mac, but it doesn't mean that it runs as well as it could on a giant PC with 4 graphics, high-end NVIDIA graphics cards. I mean, there's just a lot of things that won't run as fast on it. It's an incredible system, but it's like Houdini. Like you really have to commit yourself. Are you ready to accept the program? Like that's really the issue. It's kind of a Jason Bourne kind of thing. Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, it's kind of a red pill, blue pill, or green pill. It really is. And when Avid closed down the Avid DS or digital studio system, which I had, many of my friends went over into the Flame, and it was a very expensive shift. But there's also a cultural issue in that a lot of that was started up in Quebec. And so there's a whole French-Canadian perspective in there somehow that it was kind of a thing.
We tried to train a bunch of folks internally with Smoke. Smoke was kind of the smaller version that they had hoped to make more widely available, and we couldn't turn the corner. Like I couldn't get anybody to get good enough at it that they didn't want to just go back.
Well,
to
Motion was killing it. Motion was,
and that used to be, it's the combustion team. So they're all kind of connected. Next question.
And it's from Darren Cirillo of Dallas, Texas. I'm a Mac user, but my wife and daughter live in the Windows world. I store our photos and videos in my iCloud account. What is the best way to share these in the event that something should happen to me? Would you copy them to an external drive?
Good, Felipe.
In case you decide to go this route, Synology, NAS, they have the Synology Photos is a way to back up your photos. Once you have that configured, you open the application on your phone and uploads there, and it lives on your Synology. Then the Synology can back up to a bunch of other different places. I use that personally with my whole family and some of my friends, and it works really well. And I own the storage and don't need to worry about Google having any of my stuff.
Good, Karl.
So if you're already in iCloud Photos, then that's your answer. So iCloud is not locked into the Apple ecosystem. So all the iCloud stuff, which is all the work apps, all the iMovie, all that kind of stuff, can work on Windows as well via Chrome. So simply, as long as they've got Chrome on their Windows, they can actually log into your iCloud account and they can manipulate all your photos as if it was photos on a Mac. They can share, they can make new albums, they can share those albums, they can export. The way the export works is the same way as like sending like someone an album. You got 30 days to download it, so that's the way it works. But yeah, you can do everything from log into iCloud via Chrome on a Windows machine. You can access all the photos as if you're on a Mac.
There you go, Jason.
And if you go to digital-legacy.apple.com, that'll take care of your access problem. Apple has long had a way that if you get hit by a bus or, expire all on your own, there's a way that a loved one or a next of kin can be designated prior to your death. So that's how to do it.
There's some light conversation for a Tuesday morning. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and actually you can do it. You can set that up right now. There's a thing called Legacy Context in iOS from 15.2 on. And if you want to go there right now and designate somebody to take over your account, they won't have any hassles in getting into it.
Just kept digging in there. Go ahead, Sky.
I'll see if I can turn this curve here. No, family photo app is what my daughter-in-law hired because of our grandchildren. She said, I don't want to put my photos up on social media for everybody to see. I want my family to see it. And so we have all adopted into this app called Family Album. And it works on all the different mobile devices, and we share images back and forth all the time, and it's great to see family.
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Yeah, I've moved on to the witness protection program, so I don't have that problem.
So the most archivists will tell you that it's 2 physical locations and 1 in the cloud. So those physical locations should be diverse enough that they're not connected to natural disasters. So your house and your garage are probably not enough, especially in Northern California where it fires all the time. So so you want to have them, those 2 copies, 2 different places. I'm looking at putting my family photos actually on AWS Glacier. Like I don't need to go get them. I don't need to use them. I don't need to share them. I just need to put them somewhere where they can sit. So it's kind of a slow archive system, but it's I feel like that's going to be secure. And then I'm copying mine right now. And this summer I'll move my copy to Pennsylvania. One copy to Pennsylvania, and then it won't get updated all the time, but it'll be updated relatively often. So I'm going to kind of set those up. It's like a little summer project for me. Next question.
From Julian Meinhold in Dortmund, Germany, I'm looking for an app that offers on-device compression, sensitive data for PDF files on the Mac. It should enable me to reduce quality so I can get any file under 150 kilobytes. Any suggestions? Thank you.
Go ahead, Karl.
So the answer is Preview. So the app that's built into the Mac. Essentially what you want to do is you want to open your PDF, then you want to go to File, Export, not Export PDF. So not that one, you want to go to Export. Once you go to Export, it's going to give you some options. So you want to select PDF, and then you want, in your Quartz filter, you want to just reduce file size. Now this will really compress any images that are in there, but that, you want 150 meg, so that's not going to be a problem. So, 150K. So essentially this will do it. If it's still too large, you can do this, save it as a new file, then bring it back in and do it again. And it'll just keep on compressing your images. Your images are going to be the problem there. Text is not going to take up that much space. But yeah, so this is how you do it. It will compress it a lot. So just be aware that images will look quite pixelated once you do this.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yep, I second that. Preview is your best friend, and I'd say it's probably one of my very favorite apps on all of Mac OS. It's just the perfect Swiss Army knife.
I will say that if you're serious about this, this is one place I would highly recommend buying Acrobat. I mean, Acrobat is built to make PDFs. Like that's what it's built for, is PDFs. It is a PDF, and there are an enormous number of tools to hand compress things down to where you need them to go. I do agree with what Jason and Karl said, that Preview will do a lot of that for you relatively easily and quickly, and is probably enough. But if it's data that you really care about, you can go in there and really, by hand, really get these things down to a smaller number, especially when you're trying 150K. If you have any images, is really small. And so you need to figure out what you're going to do. And I think you're going to need to be pretty surgical to get into something that little. That's unless it's all text, that's an incredibly small document. Like I can't build an image at 150K that I would want to look at. That's one image. So anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael here with another question. Which synth would you recommend as a complement to the Novation Peak? I've heard the Prophet REV2 mentioned, and 16 voices is an advantage, but am open to others.
Go ahead, Karl.
So I wouldn't buy another synth that's just like the Peak. So anything that's subtractive, which that is, so the REV2, one, I would learn the Peak. The Peak is one of the most deep synths out there at the moment. The Summit being its bigger brother, it has 16 voices. That's a Summit. The REV2 is the one we're showing on screen at the moment. The REV2 is going to be exactly the same synth. You're just buying the same synths again. So I would actually, if you've got the gas and you really need to buy a new synth, you got that inch, then I would buy the OP6. It's an FM synthesizer. It's a completely different architecture, completely different type of voice. You'll learn a whole new type of synthesis. This is kind of additive synthesis with sound waves. This goes a little bit further, this particular one. But this will teach you a completely different way of synthesis on top of what the Peak can do. If you just add another Peak version of a synth, you're not learning anything really. You just got two synthesizers that make the same noises, really.
Next question.
James Fosseline in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I want to listen to the credits for Netflix on Apple TV. Can I set a default to listen, or do I always have to catch it so it doesn't jump to the next episode?
You always have to catch it, as far as I know. I don't know of any way to stop that. The whole system, almost all the networks know that they're afraid that you'll walk away and you won't watch another show. So they want to keep you hooked, and so they try to jump as fast as they possibly can. Sometimes they jump right into while it's finishing. Like the one episode hasn't finished when you jump into the next one. It's super frustrating, but I don't know any way to turn that off. Next question.
Steve Bauer in Seattle. I want to run my MacBook Pro with the lid closed, essentially simulating a Mac Mini. I've tried many tricks, but can't get it to stay awake so that remote desktop software can always reach it.
Go, Jason.
Easiest way to do this, first and foremost, I'm sure if you read on apple.com, you need to connect a keyboard and a mouse. But the real trick here is that it needs to also have a display plugged in. Now, I know you don't want a display, and that display needs to be needs to be plugged in anyway. OWC has a tiny little HDMI thing, just a little plug that is intended to, oh, there it is. Boy, Tom has one, I think. And you plug that in. They just updated it for 4K, and that will keep it awake and keep it alive.
Go ahead, Chris.
Or you can just plug the cable in and plug it like into a spare input on an ATEM switcher. That's what I do.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I do that. I do leave it with a monitor, but you need to, in energy saving, make sure that you have Wake On remote access set.
Yeah, and I think that there's a way to do this without the monitor. Yeah, go ahead, Felipe.
Yeah, there is the HDMI dummies. You you get an HDMI dummy, plug it in. But for example, I don't use an HDMI dummy. I have a Mac Mini on a data center that's constantly on, and I'm able to reboot it. One of the things that you're going to need is to have file vault switched off. If you have file vault switched on, it will ask always for your password before you actually get to the internet. There is a command on the terminal that you can input your password before the reboot, but then there's always the risk of you forgetting to do that. It is possible. It's just put it to the energy savings to never switch off. You're just not going to have the best graphics performance in terms of frame rate if you don't have an HDMI dummy or monitor switched on there.
Go ahead, Jason.
I would add to that Mac laptops are a little bit different than desktops. Categorically, as far as I know, something has to be plugged in addition to Wake on LAN when the lid is closed.
Next question.
James Fosseline in Minneapolis, Minnesota asks the question, love the synth sounds in Stranger Things soundtracks and credits. Would love a lab in approaches on how to reproduce on different synths. Would anyone like to do this? After hours?
Go ahead, Karl.
So this is something I will be doing. I've actually got the first 5 lessons planned out pretty much. This will be a workshop and after hours. We're hoping to do them in a breakout room so we can actually record the workshops, but we'll also be doing labs as well, which won't be recorded. They'll be in the general office hour space, the after hour space. Stranger Things is perfect because that's actually one that we can do quite easily, pretty much on software synths, on hardware synths, and on arpeggiator. So that one we actually can do pretty soon, pretty early on in our teachings, to create the sound and understand what an arpeggiator is. And when you run the arpeggiator, you can actually learn what envelopes are because the envelope will change how it sounds. So this is something actually we are planning in the background. NAM is just taking up my time at the moment. But after NAM, I'll be able to put more effort into actually the lesson plans for the workshops. And then we'll announce something hopefully in June or July.
Should be fun. Mitchell?
Yeah, I especially love what they do in Stranger Things because the show is essentially shot in the 80s. So a lot of that synth pop sound from the 80s is being reproduced. And it's so very basic and stands out on its own. It's not layered. It's just raw synthesizer sound. So you like it for the historical record of it.
I love that Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill is charting again. Like almost 30 years later, or 40 years later.
I noticed that.
So it is because of Stranger Things that it was incorporated into the it's got a more of a sizable thing in this season. My son has literally been binging. I think he just finished the season like yesterday, but he's been binging on it. And but they have Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill. If you haven't heard Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, run, don't walk to your nearest Spotify or Apple Music and listen to it. It's quite a voice. So anyway, I just love the fact that I think that there's a lot of opportunity to bring the good songs back. All right, next question.
Eduardo Augustine from Panama. Now my ATEM Mini Basic, that's the trash can outside, has been failing with audio when connected with a Behringer X1204. I don't experience this issue when not connected to this mixer. Can the mixer hurt my ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Karl.
So what it is the 1204 has balanced outputs and it has a few sets of them. You don't want to use those. So on the 1204, what you'll notice at the top, you'll see there's the red and white RCA. That's kind of what you'll need to go out to it needs to be unbalanced. So the ATEM Mini cannot understand balanced stereo input. If you convert XLR or even balance TRS to a 1/8 inch stereo mini jack, it's not going to understand it. So you need to go out something it does understand. So the red and white outputs, you just get an RCA to 1/8 inch stereo jack, and that will work perfectly. What comes out of the red and white jacks is identical to what comes out of the main mix. So that should be fine.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I really like to put like a Henry matchbox between it, which is dual direction, because I just don't trust what's going on there between any device and the ATEM unbalanced inputs, and keep it very, very short.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jason Beisch in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I need to reassemble DICOM files from a medical scan into Final Cut Pro. Any easier way than OsiriX, I guess that's how you say it, if memory serves, Photoshop is somewhat compatible.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've never used Photoshop to do it, but there are a bunch of programs, both free and paid, and a bunch of other models on there to read the DICOM files. These are medical image scans that come out of their high-end machines. If you can get anything, and any one of them seems to work, just depends on how many features you want. Some of them export them directly. But all I've ever done, and I've had to do this twice in my career, is to use QuickTime as a screen capture device. If you can play it, if you can bring up the image, a simple QuickTime capture will put a really nice copy of it into Final Cut QuickTime Native, and that all works. But the Reader app is the thing you got to be happy with.
Go, Jason.
That's precisely what I was thinking. I mean, basically, a client of mine is a physician, and I've got a 3D file to spin around, and I want to spin it around. So I'm thinking maybe just plug a hyperdeck in and use a PC.
Yeah, I there is a I can't think of the program right now. There's a program on the PC that's kind of like it'll convert everything to everything else, and depending, do these files have texture, or is it all just geometry?
No, they have texture. I mean, basically, they look like TIFFs with text-based structure. So the slices of the skull in this case are defined. The thickness of the slice are defined by a text file, and then the DICOM files, when I take them apart, kind of look like fancy TIFFs.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. I know I've done this before, and I just can't. It's been so long.
So have I. I just don't remember.
It's been so long that I did convert them, and I just can't. I don't remember how. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, he wants to know, the PXC provided an entry point to the industry for many over its lifetime. Can you see office hours taking a similar role?
It's more of a Sunday discussion, but definitely the idea. so like it's, and I think it has for some people already. Next question.
Doug is back again, and he wants to know, hey, Karl, I purchased the native version of OpsX and have used it a lot. Love the user algorithms. How is the hardware interface?
Go ahead, Karl.
It's essentially identical, of course. You just get that tactile feeling, but it is fully digital because it is an FM synthesis. But yeah, if you've got the software version, that's totally up to you. You can use the software version. It has pretty much all the same presets, all the same hooks. FM synthesis is very hard to program, so it is quite mathematically intensive. So most people just like to use the presets, and there's I think it's 250 presets in the opsix, so there's quite a lot. But as far as, it's up to you, whether you like a software version or a hardware version, that's up to you. But the hardware version has all the same features as the software version, I believe, because they're both made by Cork.
Can you explain what an opsix is?
So it's an FM synthesis. So a lot of people on this panel may remember the DX7, the Yamaha from the 80s, and they made a lot of pretty much all the music. And
what's FM synthesis?
So FM synthesis is a digital synthesizer. It needs to be digital because they need to be mathematically accurate, whereas analog synthesis, subtractive synthesis like a Moog, is not accurate, and it always goes out of tune. But essentially what is, with FM synthesis, you're actually adding or having sine waves affect another sine wave, either adding them together or having one sine wave modulate another. You can actually do this in series and parallel, or a combination of both, and feedback. It is quite complicated. Brian Eno, the producer for U2, he was one of the best people to program this particular synthesizer back in the 80s. Not many people are very good at programming it. The presets are very famous because that's all everyone uses, because actually programming the synths is quite hard compared to using a Moog, for instance. But all the bell sounds, all those kind of electric piano sounds you heard from the 80s and early 90s, they came from the DX7 or the DX5, which were Yamaha's FM synths. Yamaha spent a lot of money on producing this technology, and now it's either free plug-in or cheap plug-in now on a computer, because it's fully digital. It is a fully digital synth. It works perfectly on a computer as it does in hardware. So if you do want the hardware version, it's because you want the tactile feeling and you want the keyboard, but it will work exactly the same in the software version because it is fully digital.
Next question.
And it looks like a continuation from Douglas. Karl, what other synths would you recommend if I already have the opsix and wavestate native versions?
So I would suggest, if you've got the Phantom, you've got some soft synths, you've got the Peak, I would stop buying synths and now start learning them. Because you can get into this kind of gas, you can get into this gear acquisition syndrome, gas. And what ends up happening is you just end up, so you just end up buying.
We never run out of gas, in case you're wondering.
So, but the funny thing is you can keep on buying synths, but if you don't learn how to just use the basic ones, like just a mono synth, like a Moog or a replica of like a Moog mono synth, the Poly D or the Model D from Behringer, for instance, you'll get into this problem of buying synths but not knowing how to use them to their full potential. You'll find that 1 or 2 synths, hardware synths, is kind of all you'll need for nearly most sounds you want to get to. And because most of these modern synths are MIDI controlled, you can actually use a computer-based, software-based sequencer and do all that kind of stuff that your synth may not have. Just do it via MIDI, via Logic or whatever you want to use, Ableton. And then Cubase is another one. And then you'll learn the synth. So I would slow down on purchasing synths and start either getting lessons, one-to-one with keyboard lessons. So this isn't necessarily sound design lessons, but just keyboard lessons. Once a week's kind of good. 1 hour with a teacher once a week, and then spend yourself at least, half hour to an hour a day practicing as well. So you want to build up your musical skills now that you have some hardware. Once you build up your musical skills, that'll inform you what direction you may want to go as far as styles, and that'll inform you where to relieve your gas later on.
It's a real thing for me with synths. I have stopped almost. I did get the RD8 Mark II came out, and I've been waiting for it for a long time, and so I went ahead and bought it. So now I have another synth that I barely know how to use. Next question.
It's from the 7th Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, guys. We wanted to connect multiple wired headphones to a Mac Mini. Would a splitter be the best route to go, or is there a better way to do this?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I've used this. It's a little product called the Boosteroo, and it's a battery powered. It takes one 3.5 millimeter, turns it into 3. We pull them out. And I put 2 batteries in. It lasts 4 months. So it's what I love about it. It's just a small little unit that. There you go. There's a picture of it. So,
go ahead, Bill.
You want to be more fancy than that. You can find all sorts of headphone splitters out there, because that's a big deal. For example, for people playing on stage in bands, they want to take 1 feed out of the monitor bus and move it to 10 players. So there is active and passive versions of this. People like Behringer make little ones that you can plug in one headphone input, and it adds a little wall wart power boost to that and mixes it with little rotary pots. You can also get up to some professional rigs that really do an excellent job and do it through balanced connections. So there's a lot of possibilities available. Just depends on the level you want to spend into it.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Bill's right. You can also go like Sweetwater, and there's probably hundreds of devices out there. One I like is the AFX headphone splitter. It sounds good and does the job.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I went out quick to Sweetwater, found a Behringer 4-channel headphone amplifier, $29.
Karl?
That's the one I was going to suggest. That's one I own. So I own this whole set. There's a whole set of these that Behringer make. This is so it just comes in via like the headphone jack, and then you go up, but everyone gets their own individual level, which is pretty cool, especially if you're watching TV and you want to have everyone has headphones.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to say, is that one of the things that really pops up quickly is that you want to be able to control the volumes. Each person has their own sensitivities and their own headphones, and so being able to provide those, that little Behringer is great. Rolls makes another one. I like the Behringer one better than the Rolls one at the same price and size. The Rolls one feels like someone put it together in their garage, and the Behringer has a little bit better kind of form and function to it. The Behringer also makes a larger one that's a 16 with 2 inputs that you can use. The ones that we've used the most on my end are the Sound Devices HX3s, just because they're XLR in, so we can send a balanced input into them, and then everybody gets their own control. Go ahead, John.
Sorry, I had to pick this up from my floor. Here's the one that I have sitting on my floor. So,
and that's the 8-channel Behringer.
Yeah, 8-channel.
Yeah.
Rack mount, 1U rack mount.
Yeah, and so those work great if you have a larger number of people. And then if you want to go wireless, the way we do it, I mean, since we're talking about this, in Hollywood, we'll use a Comtex, which is wireless. So it'll be you just plug it into a transmitter, and then everyone just puts on belt packs and they walk around and listen to the program. Next question.
Jack B. in Phoenix, Arizona. Universal control using an M1 Mac Mini and an M1 MacBook Pro 16-inch. I can't get the mouse to go back and forth. Any suggestions? All of the boxes are checked on both machines. It's worked before. I've rebooted both machines.
Go, Jason.
I think you've got something getting in the way. I would try going the other direction and see if that helps at all.
Interesting. No, I don't know why it's not working. Next question. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly say, sometimes you forget the Mac may think that it has a second monitor and it gets stuck over there in la la land.
Next question.
The seventh scrolls back from Brooklyn, New York for wired audio connections. How would you split the audio to have the program feed playing in one ear and say comms in another?
Go ahead, Karl. Sorry, Bill. No, I jumped it. Go ahead.
That's all right. You need any of the mixers that have pan controls on the channel. So you'd bring the two different signals into two different channels, pan one hard left and one hard right, and that feed will go out to the separate ears on a set of headphones.
Go ahead, Karl.
So once again, we're back to the Behringer and the exact same line. So they actually have one. So here you can see you can actually have two inputs. So you have a monitor level and a mix level, and in your headphones, and you can see down the bottom there's actually switches where you can go mono and stereo. So you can put one on one ear, one on the other. So essentially you just have a volume control for each ear. That's how this works. It's pretty
Mitchell.
Yeah, if you already have a Dante network, you can assign channels there, and it works great. I just got a Dante system from my microphone, and I love that I can put it all over the place.
Most audio engineers that I know do some version of this where they put things in different places so that they pan them. I know some people that have 5 different positions of different things that they want around them. In fact, I know one person that mixes surround, and they put it above them and they put it out in front. They just use one of their buses to mix it into surround, so they have voices coming from all over. And they said it was just easier. Said at first it's very disorienting, but then it's easier to know who's talking to you. Like when you just hear something, oh, that's production, or oh, this is someone else, and so they kind of move it around in nothing like having Atmos comms. Next question.
Courtney Gooden from Hollywood, California. Question for Guy. I'm about to pull the trigger on pre-ordering the Rodecaster Pro 2. Have you heard anything on estimated availability, actual shipping in the U.S.?
Go ahead, Guy.
I have not, but I just pinged my guy there. Actually, just replied, mid-June, we will start shipping to dealers. So there you go, direct from the horse's mouth.
Next question.
This is from Douglas again. I've been using Melodics, and there's a link for it, for learning, practicing keyboard skills, but I've had trouble with faster patterns and combining the left and right hands. Would it be best to focus my lesson time with a teacher on areas I am weak?
Go ahead, Karl.
So I would suggest getting to a structured lesson plan, because these structured lesson plans will do usually just right hand first. They'll do one hand first, and you'll just be learning scales, and you'll be learning melodies based on those scales. Don't try to run before you can walk. That's what I suggest. Getting a teacher would be good, even if it's a virtual teacher, once a week at least. And they'll be able to see your bad habits and make sure you steer away from those bad habits, or they'll know if you're trying something that's a bit too advanced for where you're at the moment. It's better to perfect the beginner skills than try to do the intermediate skills too early.
Next question.
Douglas is back. He wants to know, for remote lessons with a keyboard teacher via Zoom or a similar platform, would an overhead camera on the keyboard itself be best? What angle camera setup would be most effective?
Go ahead, Karl.
2 cameras would be best. So if you could do like a DVE where you could show like just the bottom of your screen would be, or the top of the screen, doesn't really matter. Just a narrow like letterbox kind of size would be the actual overhead keyboard where your hands are. The other one would be a profile of you. So a camera from the side, because your posture and the way your hands are sitting on the keyboard, those kind of things are very important. And usually your instructor will sit beside you and they'll see your posture. They'll see how your hands are resting on the keyboard and see how your elbows are and where your elbows are related. That's another important thing. So 2 cameras would be best, or the ability to switch between 2 cameras, because your posture is as much as what you're playing. Your posture is also very important when you're sitting at a keyboard as well.
Next question.
Andre Delay in Berlin, Germany. What is a good way to start learning the Yamaha QL1?
Get one. Get a manual, rent one, make friends with the rental company and see if you can't figure it out. It is it's a deeper mixer than the Behringer, and I also think the software isn't as good as the Behringer software. So I think that there's it is a bit more challenging. I've used both QL1, QL5, CL5, and I think that I learned it by having a show that I had to fill in for that I had never used before. And I find that Adrenaline is an exceptional learning aid. And so I just had a manual open and just sat down and looked at it and said, well, I got to figure this out. And it was because we had a sound. It was just to make sure everyone's clear. This was not a paid event. We were donating time to something. I don't take over things like that we have backups for paid events, but this was a one we were donating all of our hardware and stuff to a benefit that was a 48-hour stream, and so it was actually a QL5, and we had someone that was going to volunteer time to help us do this stream. It was raising money for cancer, and just someone called me at 9:45 for a 10 o'clock start and said, I can't make it. like my kid has something that I have to do. And so I sat down and learned a QL5. So I hadn't really used it before. So it can be done. It was a very stressful way to do it. And I can't say that it was perfect for the first hour, but the main thing you want to understand is conceptually, you have to understand the DCAs, the buses, exactly how your, inputs and outputs, like how are these things getting from one place to the other? And understanding the basic flow, and then understanding where they are on the board is the key to the operation. Go ahead, Chris.
There's two ways that you can learn anything. You can learn it, or you can learn it.
Yeah.
And learning it in your head is a tiny fraction of it, but very vital. I can remember doing some of my first live broadcasts in the 80s at the time, it was a very big client for me, switching shows. And I literally, on my coffee table, I taped out all the controls that I was going to have to reach for. And I would practice how, it's like, and I need to do this. And there was, it was like the physicality of where I would reach for things to make certain things happen was definitely part of the process. And I think that in my career, most of the engineers I work with just learn it up here. And you really have to understand every process, every step of something that's, difficult like that.
I almost always learn hardware by doing something for free for somebody. I don't do it. I play around with stuff myself, but there is nothing like doing a pro bono project for someone, because they're going to make requests that you didn't think of, and that they just want it the way they want it. And it forces you to just figure it out, like really figure it out, not build around your inadequacies, and so, which is what you do when you do your own project. And so, working for someone else, donating some time, donating space or whatever, volunteering has been the number one way that I learn. And I just dig into it. I start doing it and open the manual. I have to admit, I'm not very good at reading manuals until I'm in it. And then I have every manual on my iPad, and I'm like, okay, where's this? Or I have a YouTube channel open, literally a laptop with YouTube open. And in the dead time, I'm like, okay, I got to watch this. And again, adrenaline, you learn it, and then it burns into your soul very quickly, because of all the internally produced drugs. Anyway, next question.
It's from Jonas Isjer from Karlsruhe, Germany. Where and why would you use a data mixer from Barco or Analog Way instead of with a Blackmagic video switcher?
I'll go with Bill.
So I've done a little bit of data projection, not a ton, and maybe Guy has much more technical details, but the problem for me has always been when you start throwing data up on a big projection screen, there are so many things that can so easily go wrong, particularly in things like thin fonts, too much gain on the white screen around fonts, so that the data gets impossible to read in a projection circumstance. I would always want the maximum amount of control, and my assumption would be that these specific tools allow you to make so many changes that you can get back into the audience-friendly, readable environment with professional data projection tools, as opposed to just throwing data up on something designed for video. Video is much easier, I think, to put up on a screen and make it look good than is small black type on white backgrounds and things like that, which we see all the time.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, typically you're going to see these in the rental market or event market because they're just solid. They're built like tanks and they can be tossed around and they just work every time. And so the cost is many times more expensive than the similar Blackmagic gear. You can't throw the Blackmagic gear around like you could a Barco or like an Image Pro or something like that. And these have just been standards in the industry, and they're fast. I mean, their scalers are accurate and they are fast, 10-bit. And so if you're doing iMag, those are the default go-to. So that's where you'd use them. It's mostly in the event world. But yeah, a lot of people are transitioning to owner, and they buy Blackmagic because they can own it instead of renting it.
Yeah, I've used Analog Way a couple times, and all I'll say is that I probably wouldn't do it by choice. So that's all. It's very popular in Europe, and so we don't see as much of it here. All right, we are now changing subjects and jumping into our second hour. We're really excited to have Gergana Angelova and Stephen Najeski here from LucidLink, and we to give you kind of background. A couple people here started using LucidLink and started talking about it and talking about how great it was. And then some of our teams working on the NAM and the or NAM and Cinegear started using it, and LucidLink has graciously let us play with it a little bit, and a lot of people really enjoy it. So we thought it would be great to have Gergana and Stephen come on and explain to us, to all of us, what LucidLink is and answer our questions. Hi guys, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Going great on our end.
Very, very good. And tell us a little bit about what LucidLink is.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having us. It's really exciting. Great to see everyone. LucidLink is a cloud file system. Generally, people think of us as a cloud storage, but we're not. We partner with cloud storage providers like IBM, Amazon S3, Azure, hyperscale cloud object storage. And what LucidLink is, it's a service that sits in the cloud next to those storage providers, and a client application that makes connectivity from the user's machines to that storage layer, and it allows you to interact with your data in a new, completely unique way. So it removes the need to download and upload files constantly and synchronize data across multiple machines. So everyone is working from the same source of truth in the cloud. And it's really well suited for media workflows because it works really well over high latency networks like the internet, for example. And it works really well with large files. So that's what it is. And yeah, we can get more into how exactly it does what it does.
Yeah, and I think maybe the best thing to do is go ahead and jump in. I think you have a demo that you can kind of show us basically how it actually works.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share my screen.
And for folks who are watching, as you watch this, go ahead and throw those questions in, and then we'll start digging through them after we get through this.
Perfect. Yeah, if you see, when LucidLink will work on a Mac, Windows, or Linux, so it's very cross-platform. And when you install it, it's just this lightweight app here at the top. And jump to the wrong screen. But when you interact with it, primarily, it's just going to be at the file system level. So here on a Mac, it's going to look like Finder. In Windows, it's going to be in your File Explorer. And so it can be essentially trick your computer into thinking that this cloud object storage is a locally mounted drive. So it shows up here on the left side. Here's just a series of projects and folders and things like that I have, and can navigate in here, look into playing some media. Again, all of this is in the cloud, but it navigates fluidly as if it's just a locally mounted drive. I just hit play on it. You can see the files will just start playing. I can jump around within this. And we'll get into probably a little bit later about how this is working so fluidly over the internet. But this is kind of what's kind of amazing about it is you kind of almost forget you're using it because it looks and feels just like a local drive, but yet you can have this massive amount of data that you're accessing at any point in time. And to show kind of the interactivity piece, Gergana, I think you are gonna.
I'm creating a folder for you. And let me rename it real quick. Just for background, I am in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Steven is in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona. I just started uploading a file in that folder. it is about 200 megabytes or 189 megabytes large.
See, kind of the crazy thing about this is I'm actually going to start playing this, and it's not done uploading yet. And this is probably a good time to get into how that's possible.
How is it doing that?
I'm laughing so loud. So basically, the secret sauce of how this all works is that when you first drop a file into LucidLink, when she put this file in here, the first thing that happens is the file level metadata is extracted and then synchronized across all users of the file space instantaneously. That's why it showed up right away. And that's why things like folder creation and folder renaming are just instantaneous, no matter how far away you are. The next thing that happens is the big file is broken up into little blocks. So it's broken up, usually 256 kilobyte blocks is the default, but you can change that. Those blocks are then encrypted and then flushed up to the internet over parallel connections at the maximum speed of your internet. So that part is much like Signiant or Despera, where it's a parallel, accelerated upload and download. But the fluidity of those blocks, what is so magical about that, and what makes that work where I can hit play before she even gets done uploading it, is that my application, in this case, it was just QuickTime Player, is asking for the blocks that represent the beginning of the file. And those were there. And so it works. If I had tried to jump to the end of the file and play it before it was uploaded, that would not have worked, of course. But it allows for things like growing files. If you're recording a live event, you can actually edit the beginning of it while the event is still happening.
So those are immediately available. So, and that's a thing that we used to pay. I paid, not that I'm bitter, a lot of money to have a piece of hardware that would build me a growing file of an SDI input. In this case, you're just talking about if I'm recording this to a drive, to my LucidLink directory, it's showing up somewhere else in the world in real time, and someone can sit there and open that file, and whatever's been loaded is available to edit.
Exactly.
One other thing that is really interesting is the fact that you're saying that Stephen right now has access to a certain amount of folders. He's a end user. I'm the admin of this LucidLink file space, and I can give him access to a few more folders that he currently doesn't have access to. So you can see how quickly data that he previously didn't have access to can appear, and he can immediately start using it. And I'm just going to add you to a group that has more access, Stephen. And just like that, you can see all of that pop up. And this is data, obviously, that doesn't need to be synchronized with his local workstation, but he can browse through and immediately start using.
And how does that work? So it's not loading all of these files onto his home drive, right? Or not until he wants to.
It's just the metadata at first. And so that's why I can see everything and browse through it. And then as soon as you go to open something, that's when your computer requests those blocks that represent either the project file or the media, and then they're just fed on demand. There is like a local cache. We haven't covered that yet. So when you install LucidLink, you designate a cache on your local machine. It can be an external drive, but you definitely want it to be an SSD NVMe type drive for the really high IOPS. But it works great on your internal boot drive of a Mac because the SSD inside of it's really fast. And so you just set aside, defaults to 5 gigs, but I like to set it personally to like 100 gigs. And that way, when those blocks are brought down on demand, as you hit play on something, they're held in the cache. So when you're video editing, you edit something, you play something, you make a little change, you play it again, play it again as you iterate. All those subsequent playbacks are out of your local cache, so you're actually not hitting your internet bandwidth at that point. So,
and if you make it large, when does it decide to start downloading? Like when you go to this folder, does it, like when you look at them, does it start downloading them, or does it wait until you're actually opening the file?
Yeah. So at this point, I'm looking through just this folder. I'm still in the metadata, so I'm not downloading anything. Still in metadata. Here, still in metadata. It wouldn't be until I go into a file. If I just quick look at it and hit play. Now I'm pulling down all these blocks just on demand right there. And if I jump here, it's going to skip all the blocks in the middle and just grab the ones that it needs at the end.
So it's only grabbing what you're asking for.
Yep.
But then once it's there, it's the last, you said 100 gigs, last 100 gigs that you requested is in the cache.
If that's what I've set my cache size to. Yeah.
The cache is basically the maximum amount of space that LucidLink will ever take up on your local system. So this is how you limit it not to store too many of those blocks if you don't want them stored. You can increase your cache size up to 10 terabytes, but most people do not need to do that.
But it's so, I mean, at this point, it's been so easy. Like I have these little 2 terabyte, SanDisks. So this would work, right? I could just get one of these, pop it in, and just say, this is my cache, and then it's there, right? And then it's
exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. So it caches it. Is it compatible with everything? Some things? What is it? Does it work better with some apps and not others?
The LucidLink file space basically is it works on the OS level. So it's a file system on the OS level. It's not something that integrates into an app. So whatever can read and write to a local disk can read and write to a LucidLink file space. So in that sense, it is compatible with pretty much every application. And yeah, that's basically it. We do focus a lot on media workflows, and people mostly use us with Adobe Premiere, Resolve, Final Cut, but it is a general purpose file system, so you can store any files on it.
And we've got a couple comments and questions from the panel. Mitchell?
When is a proxy not a proxy anymore? Because it looks like as soon as it's a proxy until you need it, and then it ceases to be that and turns into a cache file. Is that what's happening?
It is never a proxy if you didn't put a proxy there. So we are not going to transcode your data. We're not going to change it in any ways. It is whatever files you're putting inside, that's the files that you are going to see. So we're not doing anything with the data. We, in fact, don't know what your data is at all because of the level of encryption. Neither us nor the storage provider knows what data you have in there. So whatever you put, it may be, an 8K file. If you request it, it will be playing back an 8K file.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I'm just sitting here agog because as Felipe introduced it to Chris introduced it to me, I said, we've learned how to not do things in our global back office communications of storage and file systems and trying to edit things. And when I was introduced to this, and we've been pushing, as was just exampled, we've been throwing Premiere up and playing it from Premiere over that file system and Blackmagic and Final Cut. And so to have a global digital access to a global digital bucket is amazing to me. Now, I think the next thing we're going to try to say you can't do that is how do we get this to a mobile device, i.e. the Mac OS? I mean, so that's we're going to help you break that open pretty soon too.
And how does it interact at all with iOS?
Currently, no. Currently, it supports Windows, Mac, and Linux. Mm-hmm. But all of these other things are on our roadmap. Eventually, we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
So, thank you. When Felipe finally forced my eyes open, it was blown away. He does some other stuff that's actually very cool too. I'm noticing when I run like a disk analyzer that on my home drive, there is a giant hidden LucidLink thing, but my cache is actually set to an external drive. And I don't know what that is. Can you give me a hint of what I might be looking at? Because it seems like it says it's 479 gigabytes.
Actually, Stephen, can you stop sharing your screen? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can. Yeah. Chris, can you, you're seeing a hidden folder being that large?
So if you see this is just one of these disk analyzer things. And this sector here, if you will, says .lucid hidden item 479 gigabytes, but my cache is on an external drive. This is a scan of my internal drive.
Felipe, go ahead.
Felipe has his hand up.
Yeah, so when you set your cache to an outside disk, if you ever open the LucidLink application before that disk is available, that cache will default to your local drive. So the thing about using cache on an external disk is you need to make sure the disk is mounted before the LucidLink application opens.
That is correct.
Okay, is there a way? So LucidLink automatically launches when I turn on the computer, as does the drive. Should I set LucidLink to not automatically start in the morning?
If you have the feeling that that LucidLink might be starting faster than your drive is mounting, probably yes.
All right.
And how do you get rid of that cache if that happened?
You can delete the .lucid folder
cache,
but just make sure that will obviously erase your cache. But so just make sure that you first set up your drive to be, again, your cache, your external drive, and then just make sure everything's there.
And Felipe has been kind of pushing the edges of LucidLink. Can you tell us a little bit about how you use it, Felipe?
Yeah, one of the things that I come across is collaboration with other people, right? But in some of the cases, they don't need to even install LucidLink on their end because they're just giving me files. So what I've done is I've connected LucidLink to my web services, and I give people a web link that they can just drop files and it goes directly on LucidLink. So that's helpful because then I think the thing that is most difficult about LucidLink is because you have to install MacFuse. And once you install MacFuse, it's a system extension, and then you need to allow system extensions on your computer if you never used that before, and you restart the computer and so on. And if you want someone to just upload files, for example, there's a collaborator shot something in the desert and needs to send those files to you. Well, at that point, in my case, I've created that web service. So I just give them a link and it goes directly to my LucidLink and it becomes available to other people. Chris Fenwick has been using that. So I think it's been successful.
Yeah, the biggest reception that I did was 430 gigs from Keenan. He sent me some files, some Blackmagic RAW files. Super cool. He just drops them into a web browser. Done.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to have kind of a public face for that. One of the things that we have been wrestling with what LucidLink does for 20 years. like when I looked at it, I was working in, we were trying to figure out, I just remember we talked and we were on whiteboards and everything else of how do we do work. I was doing a lot of work in Zimbabwe at the time, and how do we do work in Zimbabwe and then have it available to us and have them be able to do these pieces over here. And we found that the fastest bandwidth at the time, 20 years ago, to Zimbabwe was FedEx. But things have gotten a lot better. While the transfer speeds of FedEx is very high, we did find that it's less expensive now. There's a lot of good connections. And the big thing is as all these connections all over the world get better, I think that a lot of us have been trying to figure out, how do we get into a sane connection? And this group is probably one of the most global, where we're all kind of ad hoc. We're putting together projects all the time. And how do you, I guess one question for you, Gargana, is how do you handle it if you have multiple partners? So I'm working with 3 different partners. We're all using LucidLink. And how do we handle keeping that kind of separate? Is that something that's hard or easy?
Do you mean keeping some people not having access to something and other people?
Yeah, I mean, let's say I'm an artist and I'm doing one project for Felipe, one project for Chris, and one project for for John, and one for Tom. So there's 4 of them, and they're all different clients. They don't know about each other. And I might be the admin for 2 of them and an artist for the other 2. How do I manage that in the system?
So there are a couple ways you can do that. If you are the admin of everything, you can just have a single file space and create different folders for different clients, kind of similar to how you would do it with like a NAS workflow. You give the access to the people and then they don't see everything else. Yeah. Now, if you're the admin for some and the artist for other, the likelihood of somebody being the admin of the other one is, big. So you can just switch between file spaces. Currently, there is no way from the UI to mount two file spaces at the same time. You can through the command line, which most, creatives are not, very excited to use. But this is like a very soon, in an upcoming release. It's on our roadmap, one of our next features, to have multiple file spaces mounted at the same time. I say very soon. Don't quote me on that.
To tack on what I'm showing here is right now you just have to switch between, which takes about 5 to 10 seconds if you want to switch between multiple file spaces one at a time. Yeah,
that's great. That's
great. So it's basically you unplug one drive, plug in the other drive. That's kind of what it feels like.
Oh, absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. The questions are starting to stack up, so let's go ahead and go to the first question.
And it comes to us from J.J. McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. As more workflows become unified with shared storage options, what would be the minimum security requirements to prevent the spread of viruses or hacks?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with this one if you want. Our security model is really quite amazing because we first separate the metadata from the data itself. They're both encrypted, and it's client-side encryption, or decryption. I mean, so it's zero knowledge. LucidLink can't see any of your data. The cloud object provider can't see any of the data, and so as soon as when we showed the example earlier, when she granted me access to those folders. That allowed me to see those. If she were to revoke that access, they disappear just as quickly. And anything held in my cache is a bunch of encrypted blocks, which is just gibberish at that point.
Go ahead, Chris. You say,
I was just going to add that, the storage itself is backed by, the largest storage providers in the world. So we're talking about the security that an Amazon data center would have or an IBM data center would have. So from that perspective, things are pretty secure. Now, we do have also an additional feature that is, snapshots, and that can revert back to an older version of your entire file space, or you can access older versions, multiple of your entire file space, and in read-only mode, so you can recover any files if, God forbid, you were subject to a ransomware attack or something like that.
You go ahead, Chris.
So I think this is related a little bit to security, but is there a way to, if you have two instances, let's say I'm on one account here, and then I have to do work with somebody else's instance of LucidLink. Is there a way to quickly, efficiently, magically move large amounts of data from one instance of LucidLink to another? Or do I have to download, I don't even know how to say it, download it here and then push it back up laboriously, slow internet connection to the other one?
So basically you're asking if you have to always pull data to the ground, then to push it to the cloud again, if you are. So you have to. Everything needs to go through the client at the moment. But, a workaround for that could be you spin up a virtual machine in the cloud and, make that connection between the two file spaces. So you're not pulling anything to the ground, especially if you have, if the two file spaces are in the same region and then your virtual machine is in the same region of the data centers, that will be extremely fast.
What I hear you saying is, if I want to learn Kung Fu, I should learn in the construct.
Good,
yes.
Felipe.
Well, on the subject of security, I would recommend a couple of things. Design your workflow, how your folders are working, because this way you should be able to not give root access to everyone. So separate who has access to what within your file space. This way you can mitigate problems in case they occur. And the second one is on LucidLink, you can create user accounts in groups. So do not allow people to share a user account. So this way you have some sort of accountability and you are able to kill the source of a problem very quickly. And with groups, you can easily assign people to groups to have access to specific folders and people to be part of specific groups. So very similar to ACLs.
Very good, Sky.
And Chris, to your question of can you have access to different accounts? I'm a witness to say yes, because while I have the OH space account available to me, I will close that and then open up into the OH, the thing that we're working on the NAM and the Cinegear situation. So it's different administrations, different buckets, but magical all the same.
Next question.
And the next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Is your product compatible with on-premises object storage platforms like Amazon S3 on Outpost or similar?
It is. So any S3 compatible object storage on-prem or in the cloud, LucidLink is compatible with.
And so, and I guess if you have S3 and you have the instance the way you were talking about it there, you're only paying for what it's caching, right? So it's caching into S3, and I guess you're paying egress fees as well as you move.
Yeah.
on.
So I mean, pricing is based on typically on storage and egress. That is with all cloud providers. Now we just rolled out plans that include egress, so you don't have to worry about that. But generally, if you are using your own cloud storage provider, if you chose to use Amazon or Microsoft, and you are paying egress to them, what happens is you're only paying that egress for what you're using. And with LucidLink, what you're using is not the entire files necessarily.
Right.
It is, the portions of the file that are, for example, in your timeline or your in and out points.
That makes sense. Next question.
And it's from JJ McKenna in Santa Venetia, California. Where is a usable web interface to share files, similar to the other file sharing services?
Roadmap item.
Very good.
That is why Felipe is using his own connection to web services, because currently a web browser application is not available, but it is coming.
You go ahead, Felipe.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you can contact me if you need that immediately.
Very good. And do you have any connection with Frame.io or any kind of tie-in with that at all?
Me?
No. I was talking to
well, Frame.io works in such a way that it needs the data to live in its own storage.
Right.
And obviously, LucidLink needs the data to live in its own storage. However, if you use, for example, camera to cloud, which is a great workflow, you can, if you download the data, because with Frame.io you do need to download the data in order to use it. If you download it on your LucidLink file space directly, and one single person downloads it, now everybody's able to use it together.
That's great. Next question.
John Snyder from Reno, Nevada. What happens if two users pull down the same file and both work from their cache and try to upload conflicting copies?
You're never uploading. Yeah. Go ahead, Steven.
Yeah. So what's kind of amazing about the way our technology works is it monitors changes at the block level. So there's a couple of things that can happen. So if you have two users who are accessing the same file, if it's a project file, usually that's going to be handled by the client application. So, Adobe Productions or DaVinci Resolve collaborative mode, that kind of thing. Final Cut sadly doesn't have that yet, but we're hoping it will come. If you're talking about an actual file, say two users open a QuickTime movie in Cinedeck and they're trying to do an insert edit or something like that. If they're doing it at different parts of the file, which hopefully would be the case, then the block level changes would update. So if user A changes something at the beginning, user B changes something at the end, just the changed portion would be synchronized with the file space. So the metadata sees the change, updates itself, and then pulls the blocks.
But you're never creating necessarily a second version of the file, because when you are playing it back, you're not downloading it, you're streaming it. So when you're updating it, you're also just, as Steven said, not uploading the entire file. So there is not a conflicting version. You're just updating the portions of the file that changed.
And what does happen if someone opens it like a Final Cut file? I guess if your event's there, or if you put it there, what will happen if two people open the same project?
Final Cut is the worst example of what happens.
Right. So the other apps have kind of a collaborative mode where you basically check in, check out, or lock it so that one person's open at the same time. Final Cut
doesn't have that. So Final Cut assumes you're working on a local drive, and it sees LucidLink as a local drive instead of, for example, as a SAN or a NAS. So Mac OS doesn't have global file locking, so we cannot necessarily do anything about it ourselves. Apple can. Hi, Apple friends. So currently what happens is two people can open the same Final Cut library, which is not great.
Right.
So people implement check-in, check-out workflows. And Sky and Chris can probably talk to that more, what their way of doing that is.
And how do you do that? Go ahead, Chris.
It's pretty primitive. If Sky's going to open the library, he changes the name of the library to Our Important Show - I'm in the library, leave it alone. And then when he's done, hopefully he takes that appendix off the end of the file name.
Does it work much like a database, so that if two people want the same block, which is unlikely, does it lock out one or the other? I mean, you can't negotiate two at the same time, right?
If we're talking about media files are largely used in read-only mode. So as many users as need to use it at the same time, they can. So if 100 people are trying to play back the same file, they can. If we're talking about project files, that is where, it's application-based, what can be locked and what can be unlocked.
If somebody has they're working on a timeline and the media gets updated, will it update right through to the timeline? Let's say you're using Premiere.
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Next question.
Next question comes in from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Give me an elevator pitch on why I should use LucidLink over Google Drive file stream.
Go ahead, Felipe.
Let me show my skills to sell LucidLink here. LucidLink is, first of all, block-based storage, and Google Drive file stream is file-based. So generally speaking, you're going to traffic a lot less data on LucidLink than on Google Drive. The second thing is, which is I think the most important, is Google Drive has a data traffic limit per day that you have absolutely no control over. So once you reach that limit per day, you can't download and you can't upload anymore. Generally, it's around 750 gigabytes, and that's going to you're going to renew that data every 24 hours. But with LucidLink, you can just traffic as much as you need and as much as you're willing to pay there.
And what I think is also, and maybe I'm not completely informed on Google Stream, but with Google Stream, are you actually streaming or are you synchronizing the data to your?
You can stream.
You can stream.
Yeah, you can stream. Also uses their own version of MacFuse, but it's not as stable and not nearly as nice as LucidLink, honestly.
Very good. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've used Google Drive, I've used Dropbox, I've used all kinds of file sharing things. I've done very large scale jobs just using Frame.io as a central repository where everybody was getting stuff. It's really hard to describe, and I feel like, your typical Mac user saying this, but it's really hard to describe just how seamless the LucidLink mount that I have on my drive is. It's just there. If Sky is changing something, I see it changing right away. I don't have to go find it. I don't have to go. I did not know about the 750 gigabytes, but that explains things to me, Felipe. Thank you. It just works. I mean, I hate saying that, but that's what it does. It's there. I see the file. I already have access to it. It's so cool. I love it.
What I would add to this is we do have a 2-week free trial that gives you unlimited storage and unlimited users, and you can just test it for yourself and see, and maybe you will find the difference for yourself and for your workflows and see if there is a fit.
It does mess with your brain a little bit when you start using it. You're like, wait, this shouldn't work, and then it does work, and then you're like.
So here's, as an editor, Gargana, as you know, one of the things that I find most frustrating when somebody in IT says, well, this is how we're doing it because they've tested it and this works just fine. They're not doing what we do. They're not dealing with enormous files and things that are rapidly changing and things that are getting updated. And and let's just face it, Google sucks.
Okay.
I wouldn't go that far. But yeah, LucidLink is something that first video editors love, and then, it kind of goes to the rest of the organization. The video editor goes to the IT team and says, I want to use this. How can we make that happen instead of the other way around? It's something enforced onto you.
Let's go to the next question.
And it's from James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland. Does the storage have to be hosted by a third party? Can you create your own cloud storage with something like Synergy NAS?
Did you want to?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question necessarily. If it's S3 compatible storage, object storage, it has to be. You can't just put LucidLink on top of like a NAS or something like that.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael in with a question. In 2015, U2 toured with an EMC storage array to store live concert video for their Disguise server. Could you see LucidLink useful for live event production workflows?
Absolutely. Yeah, we know of several people using it in that type of environment already. You have large cache is what you'd want to go with, of course. And then because you're writing those files locally first, when you're ingesting into LucidLink file space, it hits your cache first. And then from there, it's broken into those little blocks, encrypted and flushed. So, if you're talking really long form or lots of camera angles, you want a large cache, you want a good internet connection. But it does work really well for that.
Yeah, I think that this is, the live workflows I think could work, but the growing files thing is a big deal for me. I mean, just being able to have somebody that's not on site being able to make the edits. A lot of times we have fast turns. So we get, we have a show that I'll have a show, and I've got, if I'm streaming the show, I've got a lot of bandwidth. Usually, for big shows, I'm starting with a gig of connectivity, and I only need maybe a couple hundred megs for all the whole ladder to be sent out on HLS or whatever. But I've got tons of headroom, and I can separate that into a VLAN and put that out there. And normally it means it's a bunch of extra gear that I have to set up on site to put something back in the cloud. like I'm not doing, there's nothing there. So I've got an extra editor and I've got all these other things. And now I have to have another space that is, not a trivial amount of space. Like you think of, it's just another person. But to me, another person is a 10-foot by 10-foot square. So I'm asking for an extra 100 square feet for that person to do that edit. And so instead, I've got someone sitting at home, or I'm visualizing this. I don't have that yet, but I'm visualizing the opportunity here, which is that I have someone at home that's getting this footage and able to recut it. And I've got some really fun R&D to do that with.
You can manifest it into existence pretty easily.
Well, and you can take advantage of the time zone thing and really get 24-hour workflows that way. You can have people accessing it from anywhere.
I could send all the cameras for a concert into the cloud and then have someone recut a show while we're still in the show. I really like that. All right, Chris.
I think this is somewhat relevant. And maybe it's not. Maybe I'm just trying to talk. Can you talk about the pinning feature for a moment?
This is super relevant. So yes, the way cache works normally is on request. So whenever you're playing back the footage, that's what is caching. What pinning is, it's pre-caching the entire file. So this is a way to mitigate low bandwidth for some users, or you maybe have high bandwidth, but you're trying to color an 8K RAW file uncompressed. So obviously your internet connection is not going to able to support this bit rate, but what you can do is pin the data, and that will preload it into the cache. Now, still not creating a second version. And I will keep emphasizing on that because, you still have the single source of truth in the cloud. If you or someone else on your team changes something to the file that you have pinned, you will see that change and everybody else will see that change. So it's still real time, real life collaboration. But you do have that pulled down to your local cache, and you can pin a file, a specific file, or an entire folder.
By the way, whoever came up with the phrase "single source of truth" deserves a huge raise, because that alone sells LucidLink.
It's our founder and CTO, so I don't think we can give him a bigger raise than that.
I think that was I know that was a mantra at Salesforce for a long time. Like we streamed a lot of stuff for Salesforce, and that's all they talked about. Next question.
David Brady from New York City. For corporate enterprise customers, are there any ties into SSO Active Directory for access permissions?
Yes, so we currently are compatible with Azure AD and Okta, and there are others in the works on the roadmap.
Excellent. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. Can we have a second office hours, after hours session on how to create Felipe's solution for uploading the files to LucidLink?
Is that something you're sharing, Felipe?
It doesn't take a whole second hour to show that. I mean, I can. The thing that makes it more likely for people to use what I'm doing is because I have gear on a data center. So it's not going through a home connection. It's closer to where the data is for LucidLink and so on. So that's the whole advantage that I'm offering there. And I'm only offering that while LucidLink themselves don't have that option. Once they have that option, I'm not going to need to be doing that.
It's really cool. Yeah, I can't wait to have it. I can see that. Yeah, it'll get tied very tightly into the current thing down the road. So I don't think I would spend. We're happy to show. I mean, I'm sure it sounds like Felipe is happy to show us how he does it in an after hours, whatever. But I think that I wouldn't spend too much time figuring this out, because you could just have Felipe help you with it for now, and then have it sorted out by LucidLink soon enough. Go ahead, Sky.
This is my hand up. Yes, Felipe, I need that help, and we'll talk. Because this NAM project, we have a use case for that like today.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that whole opportunity, because a lot of times we have problems where we need social folks to, we need people to send us a whole bunch of things. Like we post something on Twitter, like, hey, post a video, post your question here. And the idea of being able to have post your question here and have all those files end up just on a folder that I can just look at. There's so much work that we do just to manage that process. It makes me insane. So I think that would be a killer solution. Chris looks like he's pregnant with an idea.
Well, I was going to ask Felipe, does your I'm going to call it the file bouncer. Does your file bouncer work from a phone?
It does.
Oh, there you go.
It would, because it's from a web browser, right? So
yes,
it's very cool. All right, next question.
Mickey Makachor from the Philippines. Are there plans to have the ability to create snapshots of not only entire file spaces, but individual files and folders as well?
There is no ability. I'm curious as to what the use case is, though. Maybe it is a feature request.
Yeah, I think that it's I think it's
well,
just
Mickey works in audio so much. I wonder if he's thinking about the ability to update audio files or something like that inside your LucidLink area.
It's just that it's not, you may not want to snapshot the entire space. Like maybe you have eight terabytes of content, but you only care about, or the only part that you want to snapshot is, 1 terabyte of it.
Something maybe, something to clarify maybe with snapshots is that you're snapshotting mostly metadata and the changed blocks. So you aren't snapshotting the entire data. So your snapshot is not going to take up almost any space until, let's say, you delete some data. So if you have 8 terabytes in your file space and you delete 2 terabytes and you had a snapshot before you deleted them, now the snapshot is going to be, 2 terabytes in size. So it's basically, other than that, if you're not deleting large data out of your file space constantly, your snapshots won't be taking any space. And then, that space will be freed up, of course, when you drop the snapshot, which has a retention period that you set up.
Go ahead, Mitchell, real quick.
Mickey mentions versioning.
Oh, so for versioning specific things. That makes sense. Next question.
Eric Nathan from Bellingham, Washington. Do you have plans to add 2-factor authentication?
Probably. I don't know the answer to the question, to be honest.
I don't remember if that
I
one's
would
on the
imagine.
roadmap or not, but it probably is.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama. Can we determine which destination can be used, AWS or other locations?
Yes. When you first set up a file space, you have a few different options. I think Gergana mentioned it earlier that you can have some of our new plans that have the zero egress cost are based out of either IBM or Wasabi. But you can do what we call a custom plan, and then that is going to match up with any S3 compatible. So it can be Google Cloud, Azure, AWS, anything.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. Have you thought about adding cost alerting features, i.e. if the monthly spend goes to X amount, send an alert to the administrator?
If you're on one of the custom plans, you can check that through the web interface. Through our new plans with the zero egress, you kind of know what your bill is automatically because it's a flat rate. You just pay for data under management. So if you have 10 terabytes, you know exactly what your bill is going to be every month.
Is that you have anything else, Gergana?
And I was going to say the exact same thing.
Excellent. I think next question.
Guy Gleason on the panel, and he's from Seattle. Any recommendations for a global organization? Where in the would you choose the geographic location for your storage?
I would normally choose the storage to be where the most users are, or where the most users are doing heavy lifting. So I would choose it where the latency matters the most. So if I'm on the West Coast and we have someone in Europe, I'm doing all of the editing, and maybe the people in Europe are just uploading data, I would put it closer to me because latency matters more for editing than it matters for uploading data.
Go ahead, Sky.
I think we tried to find a middle ground. I think we chose New Jersey because we do have a global audience and we got people bringing in and taking down from all directions. So how many different locations do we have access to? Because Eric set this up as our administrator and he made that choice for us. But anywhere, Azure or any of those data centers, is that the options? Where are the data centers? Sorry.
Depending on the cloud provider you're using, they have data centers in, a dozen regions.
There you go. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next question.
Bill Davis on the panel and from San Diego. Is there any practical limit on the size of the cache you can set for LucidLink? Basically, is there a best ratio of OS memory versus cached memory?
The cache size depends mostly on the data you're using and the frequency you're using it at, and maybe even how often you're changing projects. If you're going to reuse the same files over and over again, you might, it's practical to keep them in cache for the entire duration of your project. If you're changing projects quickly and you're, for example, on a social media team and you're editing one thing today and a different thing tomorrow, it doesn't make much sense to have larger cache because you don't need those older files to be stored for months after you've finished with them.
So I'm hearing multiple larger projects kind of sends you into bigger caches where individual, I'm working in it, then I'm done. You can keep the cache as small as you can.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I guess that would also affect a lot of your bandwidth and responsiveness. So if you've got an 8 terabyte project, for some reason, all my projects are 8 terabytes. I don't know why, but they all end up being about 8 terabytes. And so I might want to have that 8 terabyte cache so that I'm not constantly going back for those files, at least during the project. And it basically dumps it automatically, right? I finish that project, I start loading other things, and it just dumps off the stuff. Does it dump off the last things or the oldest things that I have on the cache?
The oldest things, anything that's been touched by the user on any application is going to remain in cache if it was recently used.
Got it. Next question.
Serge Blondin.
I was just going to add two things about cache. If you're using an external drive, make sure it's an SSD and make sure it's not exFAT formatted. So just best practices.
What is the best file format?
For Windows is what it is. APFS.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And or the other way around.
So APFS on Mac and NTFS typically for Windows.
Exactly.
That's what we recommend. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Next question.
Serge Blondin, Montreal, Canada. If I lose internet connectivity, can I still use what is already in the cache?
You can for a certain amount of time. It basically, we don't have a true offline mode. You do need at least a little bit of internet, and we do have a lot of people who have a great experience pinning a large data set, and then you can actually edit over like an LTE hotspot because most of your transactions between the file space and you are just the metadata at that point. But if you completely, say you started at it in that scenario, completely lose connection, you'll be able to function for a while, off of your local cache. But when you go to reconnect, the system does a really intelligent sort of conflict resolution process. And so it'll look for any changes that you've made since the last time you synchronized. It'll synchronize them. If there are any conflicts, say another user tried to do something, it will try to look again at the block level and say, did two users change the same blocks? If not, then they both synchronize, and that's the new single source of truth. If two users did change the same blocks, then it will actually create a second version of it. That's kind of a rare scenario, but that's how it handles it because we never want to lose anything.
And we're not going to decide for you who created the correct version.
Next question.
Mickey Machikor from, I always mispronounce his last name. Sorry, Mickey, from the Philippines. So if I deliver a mix via LucidLink and it is inserted by the picture editor into the NLE, and I replace the file with a new mix with the same file name and same length, the file in the NLE would reference the new mix. Would this work?
Yes.
It should, because, if that's how it works on the local drive, the answer is yes. We actually recently tested that with a After Effects file. And yeah, exactly. It just renews the version.
Hey, go, Felipe. Can't hear you.
Muted, maybe?
You're muted.
Oh, so maybe dynamic linking in Creative Cloud works perfectly through this process. And it's kind of the similar idea. You update something in Photoshop, the InDesign, will reference the new version as soon as it saves.
Next question.
John Foltson, Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Could I use LucidLink to allow students to develop websites, HTML, CSS, in the cloud?
I don't know how that would work.
I would say probably not a compatible use case, unless your students are storing any of the data, in a kind of local drive manner currently. It may be for their InDesign files and Photoshop files more than the web development itself.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. Can a LucidLink volume be accessed from the command line, terminal on Mac OS, PowerShell on Windows, your favorite shell on Linux?
Yes.
Because it's just a file system, right? It just looks to all the operating system. It just looks like a file, like anything else to anything that's looking for a file.
And even more, we do have a very powerful daemon application that has a lot more functionality than our UI currently has. So it's very comprehensive.
Next question.
David Brady, New York City. Regarding uploading speeds, are there thoughts for up-down aggregators like IBM Aspera?
Well, the technology that we use actually replicates a lot of that functionality by breaking it up into blocks, pushing up over parallel connections. It's essentially an accelerated upload already.
Yeah, so it pretty much is doing what Aspera does. Like it's just, we're going to grab a whole bunch of stuff and push start. And you said there are about 256K blocks, and it just grabs all of those and just starts pushing up. And then that's pretty much the way. I mean, I think that it was cutting edge when Aspera came out, but it's the same thing that Frame.io uses. It's the same thing many, WeTransfer, a lot of them use the same block function now.
The client application communicates directly with the cloud storage, the object storage. So you have those parallel TCP connections that by default they're 64, but you can increase them or decrease them based on your internet connection.
Next question.
JJ McKenna from Santa Venetia, California. Your FAQ has quite a bit of information regarding your development. Where might we find your roadmap?
The roadmap is not public. I probably have shared more than I should have. But we do have...
It's not like we're streaming to YouTube or anything, so don't worry about it.
And no one will see this. So we do have a Slack community that anyone is welcome to join. And if you have any roadmap questions, I'm sure the discussion there might answer them.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is back. What challenges have you experienced marketing LucidLink in the video surveillance industry? Have you had to convince law enforcement agencies of the security of LucidLink?
In terms of security, we haven't had much trouble in general convincing anyone. We've never failed a compliance questionnaire or anything like that. I think marketing, we're not the people to speak to that necessarily. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, because it basically, you have no idea what's going on in there. And
we have no idea. Yeah. We don't know. We cannot restore your root user's password. We have no idea what your users are called. We have some knowledge of how much storage a file space has and stuff like that. But as to the data that is inside, everything is encrypted. Even if someone broke into your object storage bucket, all they will see is, broken down files into blocks that are individually encrypted. And the only way to decrypt that is through the username and password on the client machine. So only you know that.
And even if you couldn't decrypt the blocks, you still wouldn't have the decrypted metadata, so you wouldn't be able to piece those blocks back together again. So it's like double security. Yeah.
That's great. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, and he says, has LucidLink been used in the music production sector? Could you record from a DAW in real time to LucidLink?
Seems like you should. Just in the same way that we have a growing file, you would just be able to, just make your LucidLink the target of your record, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
That's great. And the last question for the hour.
It is the last one. It's from Douglas. Could you see a market for a perpetually licensed LucidLink product that only connects to on-premises or client-provided object storage? I could see this being useful for students and small-scale nonprofits, for example.
That would be a business decision that Stephen and I are not qualified to answer.
Yeah, it'd be hard because it'd be hard to have any kind of perpetual license because you're using cloud. I mean, anytime you incorporate cloud assets, it becomes hard because they cost something every month, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
No, absolutely. Gargana and Stephen, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and thanks for upping your. Yeah, I don't know if you're upping game. Maybe this is how you join every meeting. If so, well done. But we really appreciate you coming by and sharing a lot. We're really excited about the product. I think that even today while we were listening, I was thinking, there's like 3 other office hour projects that I think would be fun play with. So
awesome. Yeah, let us know
thanks so much.
How we can help. Thank you for having us. This was great fun.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks. And thanks to our producers for all the great questions for both the first hour and the second hour. It was a great questions through both hours. And thanks to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And also thanks to the huge team in the back doing all the edits and all the other bits and pieces. There's a massive team. You'll see a list of them coming by in just a second. And also you can check out our website. We're getting ready for the WWDC coverage next week, which will be pretty extensive. And so we've got that on the front page and check that out. And then, of course, we have NAMM on Saturday and Cinegear the following Saturday. So there is a lot of event coverage coming. So stay tuned for all of that. All right. Now we're going to jump into After Hours. There you go.
That was pretty cool.
There was a Felipe sighting. Hey, Felipe.
He's in Cupertino. He's in the United States.
Undisclosed location.
Undisclosed. Oh, are you in a hotel? Are you in a hotel, Felipe? Are you in a hotel? Specific.
Zeros and ones.
Yes, a hotel.